Good morning. This is class 4 of belonging to each other and the planet. And we're going to talk about, and the general theme is making a transition from a paradigm of narcissism to a paradigm of communion and looking at the way that means identifying and trying and healing and moving beyond and transitioning to something else, but identifying narcissism as it affects us in various realms of our life. And so I'm going to start. So today we're kind of starting with the individual psychological development, and therefore with narcissism as an individual psychopathology. And then we'll make some connections, but the whole class will be sort of about making connections of narcissism as an individual psychopathology to narcissism as a way that a culture or a people or a political system or an economic system can live or not live in the world. And I'm going to apologize for this, but I'm going to start. A lot of this is going to be, we're going to start with using He Who Shall Not Be Named as our teacher about narcissism. And I think most of us have some resistance to that because one of the things, because we're tired of how much of the bandwidth of our culture Trump has taken up, and we resist I mean, some of us. Personally, I'm past being titillated, fascinated, and amused by and horrified, some combination of those things, or whatever the latest thing is. So I'm tired of dwelling in it, and I'm not going to be doing that today. But and I think, but most of my resistance is, and maybe a lot of people's resistance is that I don't want to co-sign Trump's fundamental core belief, which is actually his only core belief, and the core belief of every narcissist, which is that it is all, and I mean everything, it is all about him. So by spending time focusing on him as a lesson for us, my intention is not to co-sign that it's all about him. And I want to say that much as would hurt his feelings, actually, he is not the cause of our problems. He's much more a symptom of our problems. But in being a symptom of a problem, he is an opportunity for us to learn something. Narcissism is about holding up a mirror. And in some ways, he's holding up a mirror to us as a culture of just the most bloated caricature of the worst parts of what we're doing wrong. And in doing that, it's a learning opportunity for us. Now, the nature of Trump's psychopathology is that he will not learn from his experience. He's not able to learn from his experience, and that'll get clear as I talk some more why that's the case. But we can. Trump is not going to learn from his experience, but we can. And in that way, by focusing on him, if we feel like it, we can take a kind of a sweet revenge, because we're going to use understanding him as a way to support the growth of our own consciousness. So he can't grow from his experience, but we can if we choose to pay the right kind of attention. So Trump told us, so we could get lost in endless examples of this and that, but Trump told us everything we need to know about him when he told us, before he even, just in the beginning of his running for office, when he told us that he could shoot someone in the middle of Broadway and not lose any followers. Okay? And if you take that apart, it actually includes the two basic principles of narcissism. One is it doesn't matter what happens to the other guy, right? That's inconsequential. So the fact that if you shoot someone, someone dies, what happens to that other person doesn't matter. What matters is whether it hurts your image or not. He's saying it doesn't hurt my image, so it doesn't matter. So what happens to others is inconsequential, and that's part of the first principle of narcissism, which it's all about him. And the second part, which is really important, it's a corollary of the first, is that what he's saying is that he's immune from the law of consequences. That's a really important thing to understand about Trump and to understand his decision-making process. Trump is immune from the law of consequences. There are no consequences from him. And that's a principle of narcissism, because if it's all about you, then everyone else is inconsequential. Everything else is inconsequential. And what happens to what's inconsequential can't be a significant consequence for you. So since what happens to people outside doesn't matter, it means that he stands outside of and untouched and above everything that is not him. And he therefore is ultimately untouched, unconnected, unaffected, by what happens to other people, and therefore unaffected by consequences. There is a consequence in his life, which is do people adulate him or not? But so give me 1 second to see if I missed anything here. It's interesting when you say it means being untouched, right? Untouched is exactly untouched, unaffected, but it also means emotionally. I mean, that's the core thing of narcissism, is no ability to have empathy because you are untouched. You can't be touched emotionally by anyone else. You can receive their adoration, or you can, if they piss you off, destroy them, but you're not touched in an emotional way by them. Now, narcissism is, I think, largely badly understood in our culture. And probably maybe everyone here sees through this, but nevertheless, the overall belief is that a narcissist is someone who loves themselves too much. And I just realized I'm going to change the view here to speaker view. So a narcissist is someone who loves themselves too much. And that is profoundly not true. A narcissist does not love themselves too much. They don't love themselves at all. Narcissism is a defense, a compulsive defense against the vast experience of emptiness inside. A vast emptiness inside, and it's a defense against the terror and the horror that emptiness would feel like if one allowed oneself to experience it or to feel it. So the whole psyche is organized around not experiencing the damage, the destruction, the emptiness inside, the black hole inside. And if you think about how horrible, I mean, we all have some of that, but if you think about how horrible it is to have nothing inside, you can sort of get how desperate the compulsion is to replace that with essentially to erect a billboard of oneself. There's nothing inside. My whole job is to put up a billboard of myself. And my whole existence depends only on how people react to that billboard. It's only about my reviews. I exist actually only as others see me, which I can control by putting up my billboard and dominating it and receiving adulation for it and destroying anyone who will not bow down to it. Now, this is not, there's lots of levels of narcissism, but we're talking here the extreme pathological narcissism. Because he cannot afford to feel what he would feel if he were able to feel the destruction inside him. And so, there's the famous expression, the emperor has no clothes. What's really going on here is the clothes have no emperor. The clothes has no emperor. It's an empty armor. Now, we all have an attachment to how we present ourselves and how we're seen. We all want to be accepted. We all want to be admired. Or most of us do in some level or other. And we've all experienced rejection and disappointment and having the rug pulled out from under us, having someone that we whose relationship thus we really counted on break off from us, or losing a job, or losing our health, or at this point in our lives, most of us have had to do a bunch of adjusting to losses, and but imagine that when that happens, there is nothing to fall back on. There's no real self to group around. There's no ability to fall back on and learn and regroup and rebuild and reorient and repair. Of course, there's no foundation. There's no inner self. I just did my table thing. Excuse me. So there's no genuine resilience, no emotional resilience. And so the only thing that the narcissist can do when the thing is collapsing on him is to basically re-erect the billboard, to thought I got rid of that, but I didn't. So when Trump lost, I think most of us felt some kind of a relief and some kind of a sense of, I think there was an instinctual sense that something would collapse in him, and that he'd get it, that he would somehow be impacted, that he would somehow, ultimately, sorry. I thought I had the phone downstairs, but I didn't. There's sort of expectation that the person is going to get it. They're going to get something. They're going to be impacted in some way. And that they're going to learn something, that they're going to see the light. Oh, maybe I'm not God. Oh, maybe everybody doesn't love me and like what I'm doing. But because narcissism is a delusion, it essentially can't be impacted by reality. It's very hard to impact it by reality. So the sense that there will be some change or some growth process or some surrender or some recognition of what happened, that we kind of expect as healthier people, of course, didn't happen. And again, we have that expectation because we feel that when our illusions are busted, our ego trips are busted, our statuses, we're disappointed, or we're not as cute as we used to be, or we're not as athletic as we used to be, or wherever it is. And some way or other, we find a way, when freed of those, our delusions or illusions, that there's some inner resource, a deeper, more fundamental self, a more fundamental self that's deeper than our roles and whatever our ego attachments are, that there's an authentic self in there, and that we can use that as a firmer ground to relieve our delusions, to rebuild a healthy self on the actual reality that's going on. So in a healthy person, that's a very gut level expectation, and of course, it's unbelievably frustrating that Trump cannot be impacted. It's like the Energizer bunny, right? And so what you get is, I mean, there was a collapse. He went into depression as much as he could feel depressed, but then ultimately there's this desperate rebuilding of the false front. So what does someone whose only justification for his existence is that he is a winner do when he loses? Give me a second here. So I think I've said this already, but I'm going to just stress it once more. It's important to understand that he cannot have lost the election. Trump is not a liar. He's not lying. He's in delusion. He cannot have lost the election because if he did, he would cease to exist. He's simply compelled to make up the reality necessary to keep his fragile picture of himself erect. He is compelled to create in his mind the reality that he needs to keep his defenses up, to keep his fragile picture of himself erect, because he has no ability to go inside, and he exists only by the adulation he receives from the outside. There is nothing but his reviews. Now, we all tend to read our reviews too much. We all can free ourselves sometimes and go like, maybe who I am doesn't depend on my reviews, on whatever level we think we're being reviewed. But this is way beyond any attachment that we have to our image of ourselves. So his desperate, unquenchable hunger for adulation comes from holding that up, and basically, ultimately, narcissism is a delusion. Narcissism is a lack of understanding, one's dependence on connection of rightful, actual, realistic role in the scheme of things. And the degree of the delusion, as a therapist, I want to say delusions are really, really hard to deal with. Because people have a need for them that's difficult to provide them with the resources to substitute something better. So the degree of the delusion is a measure of the degree of the internal destruction that went on. All right, so how does such a deeply wounded person get created?
Hey, would you say a little bit more about your statement? The deeper that last statement.
The deeper the wound?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the thing that's hard to grok is I mean, I think most of us have, okay, I've certainly crashed where I go like, who the hell am I? What's going on? I feel like I'm nothing, but I, that's not all there is. There's a floor, there's a bottom, there's a sense of self. No, here I am. This is me. Okay, this was very shattering or disappointing, but I am still me. I can still be me. Who am I if I'm not a member of this club anymore? If I don't have this job anymore? If I'm not, uh, if I can't climb mountains the way I used to, whatever it is. So, but imagine that. I'll talk more when I talk about development, but that somehow your basic sense of self is so destroyed, is so non-existent that there's a terrifying hollowness in there, and you cannot afford to feel it. and that. So that's what I'm talking about. That the level of destruction, that degree of destruction, which is way beyond any of us have experienced, um, leads for a desperate, compulsive um, need to create a world that's livable. And that's why it's compulsive, and that's what makes it a delusion. That's what I meant to say. That's what makes it a delusion. And the attachment to that delusion is that the giving up that delusion, that I am the great and powerful Wizard of Oz, that I am the smartest, wisest, that I am the grandest thing and everything bows to me and I am above and more powerful than everything else. That delusion, I'm attached to that delusion with a desperation based on how terrifying it is to face, if I could, the destruction inside me. Of course, part of what's been destroyed is my ability to recognize and experience and acknowledge the destruction inside me, to feel that grief. Did that?
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah.
Okay.
Hey, can I ask a
Yeah.
question or
Go
comment?
for it.
Okay. So people used to ask me years ago what I thought about Trump, and I told them I felt sorry for him. And after listening to you today, I do. I feel sorry for him. That wow, what a horrible life to live
Yeah. You can do
because
that
of
with
your
Hitler
own
too.
because
It's
of
the same psychology.
yeah yeah
Yeah.
yeah.
Now, I
Well,
have to
thanks for
say,
sharing that. Yeah.
yeah. Okay, cool. So now I want to say that I think I leave feeling sorry for him to better people than me. I'm not quite able to pull it off, but if my description is touching, then I've served something towards that. But but I've also worked with deeply wounded narcissists as a therapist, and so where the destruction they've done is not quite so overwhelming that I can get over the destruction they've done enough to be able to feel my empathy for them. But yeah, it's good for you.
What do you think of the idea that Buddha had that if you understood everything, you would forgive everything?
Possibly, possibly. I think that yeah, sure, forgive, yes, but you still have to understand it clear-sightedly, you know. Um, but from
But
that place, yeah,
we're never going to understand everything. So maybe just make the jump to forgive everything. Because if we did understand, we would forgive.
right.
Trump's not done. I'm not sure we should be in a position of forgiving him yet.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. As long as the person is, that's really it, isn't it? You know, so you can forgive the abuser as long as once you're safe. Till then, whether you forgive them or not on a psychological or emotional level, you gotta defend yourself. You know, so
Well, the delusion might come true.
that's right. That's right. So there'll be a whole other. We'll have another discussion about how does someone with that delusion, does he entrap other people in following him? But we're not going to go there quite today. Okay, but I want to talk about healthy human development as a context, which may help even more with the empathy. Um, so we are mammals. As mammals, we do a lot of our development of our brain happens after we're born, happens in our experience in the world. And that's true for humans more than any animal, I think, in the sense that we are born much less ready to live in the world and need much more nurturing and bringing up in our process of getting ready to live in the world. Um, Now the brain is not an object, right? The brain is a growing living thing, and the brain gets formed by our experience, and our experiences create neural pathways and connections or not neural pathways and connections um, that grow and trace our experience. And so when a baby smiles and gurgles and someone smiles and gurgles back, the baby's brain builds a connection that when I smile, someone smiles back. When someone smiles at me, when I cry, someone comes and tries to help me. So all those connections that say me and the world are connected and that connect me to the world depend on the nurturing that I get. Um, and on some fundamental level, the basic decision of whether me and the world can get along, whether the world is an okay place, depends on those experiences and on the neural pathways that say, life is okay. When I cry, someone cares. When I laugh, someone enjoys looking at me and laughing with me. So those get built, and that's really the foundation. Things keep getting built, but that early stuff is an important foundation for the basic sense of again, whether we in the world can get along, which is the same thing at that level of development as am I okay? The world is okay and I am okay. And there's no distinction. So an infant can't say, I'm really fine. It's too bad my mother is cold-hearted and doesn't know doesn't know when I need changing, right? That distinction doesn't happen. The world is one thing, and the world is either a good place or a bad place, and that's the same thing as I am either a good thing or a bad thing. Being me is a good thing or a bad thing. Um, and even when, for instance, it's even important that when the baby cries, the parent may do or the caregiver may do the wrong thing. So baby cries, caregiver changes the diaper. Well, guess what? That wasn't it. The kid's hungry. Well, the caregiver goes, well, what else could be going on? Oh, maybe it's hungry. So the fact that the world responds, but also the fact that the world responds imperfectly is part of the kid developing a basic trust in the world. That when I'm in distress, someone's trying to make something happen. The world isn't perfect. It's not everything. Oh, I get everything, but you also learn a tolerance and trust for discomfort because it's in the context of the fact that you're existing in a caring world, and which is to say that you are worthwhile, that you are worthwhile. Um, Now, there's some tragic examples of that. There's a whole bunch of kids, for instance, who were put into orphanages after the Second World War, where there was not enough people to, they were basically left unattended in orphanages. And what happened was they came out blank. They hadn't built the connections to make a connection, to be cared about, to care about, to interact. And you can imagine that, right? So you smile and someone smiles back, and you smile and someone smiles back. Well, if you smile or cry and nothing happens, and you smile and you cry and nothing happens, at some point you just don't do that, and you don't build the neural connections for smiling, for crying, for interrelating, and that's can be incredibly tragic. That now this some of this is reparable, and some of it is to a point where it's hard to repair. But um, it's sort of like learning a language when your brain is between 2 and 3 or 4, something like that. Actually, between 2 and 3, your brain is ready to learn language, and you can learn 6 languages fluently without accent if that's your environment. Now, if you're 12 or 15 or 20 or 77 and you want to learn a language, it's a lot of work. You can still learn a language, but it's a lot of work. And you'll probably never speak it like a native speaker. So I think that's true of emotional intelligence or ability to relate also, that repairs can be made. It's very important that repairs can be made. The ease of them depends on the degree of the damage to begin with. Um, and but it's makeup work, but it can be done. So I'm not trying to say that people are ruined forever because they didn't get what they needed as an infant. But stuff that they could have gotten free is now a lot of work. Um, oh, and it's part of why teachers kids who haven't been socialized, kids who haven't built the connection that being in relationship is a good thing. If you have no experience that being in relationship is a good thing, you essentially aren't motivatable by social cues. So there's a lot of teachers working with kids and trying to provide social motivation and rewards, and it now it can eventually work, but it's hard for that to work because the kid isn't attuned to the fact that being in a relationship is a worthwhile thing and doesn't know how to engage in that. So now we are all shaped in various degrees by which parts of us are accepted and which parts are not by our environment, and particularly by our early environment and in our families. And those parts that are accepted, the neural pathways get stronger, they get myelinated, it's called, where they get reinforced. And those that don't get pruned. The brain does a pruning process. So basically, those parts of ourselves that have been rejected and don't get engaged become undernourished. They tend to atrophy from lack of use. And in extreme cases, they get killed off. So now what gets rejected and what gets accepted in us it will be different, and will be different in different families. So there can be a family where everybody is wild and angry and fighting all the time, and the worst sin is to be timid and afraid. We're not afraid in this family. We're all fierce fighters. There can be a family that's very sweet and peaceful and nice, and one thing you don't do is be assertive or yell or be angry. So what the rules are that are the environment for the parts of ourselves that we cultivate and the parts of ourselves that we starve depends on that environment. And also the parts of ourselves. Let's say I grew up in a household where being angry, we are not angry in this family. We are not angry people. Angry people are nasty people like our neighbors, but not us. So if I'm that, I will repress my anger, but sooner or later it becomes unconscious, and I will not be good at knowing when I'm angry. Someone else will say, "You seem angry." I said, "No, I'm not angry." So now I'll say a little more about therapy later, but the brief thing is therapy, the way I look at therapy is that it's an opportunity for the therapist to witness to unjudgmentally, to acceptingly, lovingly witness the aspects of the client that are unacceptable in the client's psyche, right? To witness the unacceptable parts of the client in support of the client being able to witness, accept, and integrate those parts of themselves. And we'll talk a little more about that. But you're fostering integration of the whole self by witnessing in an accepting way, and thereby helping the client accept aspects of themselves that they have rejected. Now, back to Trump. And now it's back to the degree of the delusion is and the degree of the pathology has to do with the degree of the destruction. So all of us have been shaped by our families, but so as a therapist, there's books now about Trump's childhood and Trump's father and my sister wrote, and those are great. I'm glad those are out there. I didn't need to know any of that. Any competent therapist can look at Trump and know what happened to him. There's no doubt, you can look at him and it's apparent that that the genuine, caring, scared, tender, vulnerable side of him has been ruthlessly attacked and stamped out. And the only thing that's acceptable is to be powerful and dominant and above and better than. It is not, and apparently later then, it turns out his brother, who wasn't quite able to play the role, got destroyed because he was weak and then he was a loser. So the whole thing, so the winner part was acceptable, and anything else was not just in the way most of us have had some parts of us that our parents weren't crazy about, ruthlessly, utterly destroyed. And so that means if that's annihilated, and that means he had to annihilate it in himself, right? You can't be weak. You can't be scared. You can't be tender. You can't be whatever. You can't be that way. So you destroy that in yourself. And then you go out and you destroy it in others. So the loser, the weak person, has to be destroyed and dominated outside, which is sort of the cost of my having had to do that to myself inside. This is all unconscious, but by the way, any people have questions at any point, speak up. So
would you say that most of the cruel leaders like Hitler, Putin, Idi Amin, Mao, were they all narcissists?
yes, I would say so, yes. You can call it sociopath or sociopathic narcissism, but I think that yes, yeah, I think yeah, yes.
So just kind of a clarification on how you're putting this all together, Bob. Am I jumping to a conclusion accurately that what you're saying is there's a continuum of narcissism in our culture, and it has developed over the generations, over the eons, and Trump is an extreme example of narcissism, but that any little bit of narcissism in any of us has a cost of making it have us the inability to connect as a society, as a community, as a people. Is that kind of what you're taking us to? Narcissism,
that's great.
Explain?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
that's a really good. So, or another way to put it, those places where our narcissism hits us are places where we have rejected parts of ourselves, and therefore don't have a lot of tolerance for those same qualities in other people. So, for instance, if I facilitate a traumatic grief group, and what people run into a lot because they're experiencing a level of grief that's unimaginable is that it's hard for people to be with them because anyway, what they're experiencing is that people's unwillingness to experience their own grief makes them unable to be close with them in their grief. Right? If you can't stand to feel your grief, you can't stand to be in a connecting way with someone who's in grief.
Thanks.
Yeah, that was great summary though. Thank you. So Trump can only win. He cannot be a loser. If he were a loser, he would be annihilated. And that, of course, works out in the world, right? Because you notice that these guys ultimately end up with their heads chopped off or hung by their legs or hiding in a bunker, killing them. You know, they do create that world where you either are the victor or you will be destroyed. But I'm talking about long before that. It's a psychological destruction that they feel like they're facing. Anyway, so come the election, again, he's not a liar. He cannot have lost. He cannot have lost. That's absolutely unthinkable because he's a winner. And you notice at no point, long before the election, at no point did he ever submit to the idea that he could lose, right? He shouldn't have been allowed to take part in the election because he never agreed to play by the rules. He never, because he always knew the only way he could lose is if it's crooked. So, so he's forced into his delusion. And now I'm back to the degree of his delusion is a reflection of the level of the destruction inside. I'll talk a little bit about therapy. So Trump is absolutely well beyond therapy. Whether he's beyond empathy is another question. But you know. But so in therapy, where we're dealing with a normal degree of, normal degree of development. One way of looking at therapy is that the job of therapy is to create I think I said this already, but I'm going to develop a little more, create a safe space where the self can be witnessed, can witness themselves, and can integrate their undernourished parts. And so how that most likely happened, one of the first things I early on in my training, there was a really great book that essentially said therapy doesn't start till a therapist makes a mistake. Because when everything's nice, it's a honeymoon, everybody's nice. And at one point, the therapist says something that hurts the person's feelings, where the person doesn't feel seen, where the person feels criticized, rejected, or whatever. So that's the point when the therapy really starts, because now can a repair be made and can something be learned from that experience? So what could happen then? So let's say the person feels angry. The therapist does something, and the client is angry. Now so the therapist's job is to witness the anger and to not respond in the way that the person expects to be responded to in anger. Like he may think, I'm angry. When I'm angry, I expect the other person to be angry back. I expect the other person to reject me. I expect the other person to run away and never want to be with me again. I expect the other person to dissolve and die, and it'll be my fault, or whatever the person's fear is about what would happen if they allowed themselves to be angry. So the therapist is a witness of the anger, and the therapist is not doing any of those things. So the therapist could say something like, I seemed to me that you grew up in, if I remember right, you were telling me you grew up in a family where nobody was allowed to be angry. And I just did something that really made you angry. And I wonder how that is for you, that I'm here, I'm witnessing you, and I'm witnessing you being angry. Is that okay? And then the client can say, whatever. No, I feel shamed, or I expect that now you're going to be mad at me, or whatever. And so the therapist can say, okay, so, but have a look. Does it look to you like I'm angry, or like I'm disgusted, or I'm going to run out the door, or no? Okay. So what is it like for you that you just got witnessed in being angry? And that seems to be not so terrible. Anyway, so you're supporting the ability of the person to be able to self-witness that, yeah, actually they do get angry, and yeah, actually it doesn't always have to have disastrous results, and that can be and so you get to be a bigger person. Doesn't mean they have to be angry all the time, but that's in their range, and becomes in their repertoire on the keyboard. You're helping, so you're helping support wholeness through witnessing. And again, that can be very different. The person's for individually, like some people can't be mad, some people can't be hurt, some people can't be weak, some people, whatever it is in ourselves that we find hardest. And we all have this, the parts of ourselves that we find hardest to accept and love and take in. Yeah, okay. I think that's sort of my talk for today. And I have an experiential thing I want to do, but interested in hearing what people might have to say. Hey,
I'd
Paul.
like from other people to give, maybe give me some thoughts on how they see those examples of what you're talking about, Bob, having impact negatively or positively to this idea of global connecting, community connecting. Where are you putting those connections in your brain to connect the idea of what you were saying to this global? How does it fit for them? And what do they, I mean, because I'm still kind of pondering how to put the macro with the micro. I can't remember my science. Yeah,
Right. So you're proposing that as a discussion question, sounds like, yes?
I just, maybe, yes, maybe I just, if someone had, he said some comments, I just want to know if anybody else had a comment on that or something that they're reflecting. But it could be later, it doesn't have to be now, whatever it is, because it's something that I was kind of pondering, putting those two together.
You want to say a little bit more about where you're starting to put it, how your first thoughts on putting it together? Or?
No, I just actually wanted to reach out and see what other people are, because I just kind of want to build on what other people's thoughts are in that area.
Yeah.
Well, I am wondering two things. One, what about the person who is the opposite of Trump? What parts of them are being rejected that make them the opposite of Trump?
Describe that person a little bit.
Docility,
Yeah.
lack of confidence, lack of billboard, no billboards. But then my second question is, what is it about the narcissist that builds a cult behind him?
Yeah. Those are two good questions.
Ooh, Jim Jones.
Yeah, there's a good example.
Yeah.
But Donald Trump is a good example too.
Mm.
I mean, people are willing to see, I mean, I feel like we can all see that he's a narcissist. And people are willing to believe the billboard without, I mean, some people are willing to kill because of what they see on that billboard. Why does that happen with a narcissist?
Yeah.
You know, if Hitler, Putin, and so on are the narcissists who have, drawn that kind of cult-like following, how is it they're so blatantly, obviously what they are, and yet people get in line, share the billboard?
Yeah.
Well, one thing, I've been in mental health as all my career. And one of the things that narcissists that I've noticed about them is that they may come across as very charming and very agreeable. It's part of the facade that they build up, but they are absolutely terrible listeners. They can't let anything in. So if you have somebody with vast political party power, they can't let criticism in. So they try to control that. So they control that through propaganda. They have a story, they have their billboard, and they put it out through whatever means, and they seek out the means to do that through social media or state television or whatever. And they don't accept or hear or want to hear anything other than that. So they don't accept criticism because, well, they're terrible listeners to begin with. So they may give the appearance of listening, but they don't. And that's one of the things that in my career I noticed with people who are narcissistic is they are awful when it comes to listening, even though they might give the appearance of listening, they don't. So I think this builds commensurate with the power that they have to control that whole process.
Yeah.
I don't know if that helps.
You know, that's great. Also, I think everybody's ever apparently people who were way against Trump, and then they spend 20 minutes or 15 minutes in a room with him, and they go like, "Oh, he was just so interested in me. He was just the kindest." Well, you know, I felt so important. I felt so important. So the big thing is that what the narcissist offers is you get to bask in and thereby participate in their glory. You get to participate in it. Now,
Egos.
I do this with the 49ers. I wear a 49ers hat and I get to participate in their glory.
Yeah.
Even though
Boy.
I would be dead in the first time I was tackled on a football field at this point in my life. So, but so so I think in a society that doesn't offer genuine empowerment, genuine belonging, a way to be empowered that is also considerate of others and connected, to be empowered and connected. It's in that social model, you're either dirt, you're either a peasant, or you're the king. And so if you're dirt and the king is interested in you, you feel a surge of a sense of your importance. And that's what narcissists are great at. They offer you the honor of being basking and being part of their glory. And to the degree that you don't have a healthy empowerment in yourself on the psychological level or socially, or all the people who are disgruntled socially and feel disempowered socially, here's someone who says, I alone can fix it, and you can be part of this. You can be part of me. So to me, that's where the disempowerment in the social system and disbelonging in the social system adds to the vulnerability. You get to be part of something that's important, something that's big, something that's glorious. You get to be part of it. And you don't get to notice that it's not actually offering you true empowerment, because the minute you don't believe whatever the tenets of the cult are, you're out, right? Trump is, his closest people are out the minute they don't toe his line. So you're not really empowered, and what you're part of is not really something glorious. But I think, yeah.
That's some of the attraction of gang membership too.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing with teenagers belonging to gangs, where they now feel the power of the gang.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at a Trump rally, you learn a lot. And the part that impresses me is he can be so derisive and mean, and people love it. It's like he gets to say what they want to say, and they
what you
always
can't say.
punished for. But here he is, and they're like, "Yeah, say it."
Yeah.
And doesn't that dispute? And doesn't that fact dispute the idea that narcissists are charming?
That what?
Doesn't that what?
That narcissists are doesn't that dispute the fact that narcissists, you're saying, are charming? There's nothing charming.
No,
not everybody in those crowds, not everyone in those crowds meets him personally and senses the charm.
No, they like his power. you get to identify with his destructiveness against whatever you think stands in your way, whatever oppresses you, whether it's people whining about being black, or women whining about their lack of power, or now you can't talk the way you'd like to talk about women. And this guy, no, he's just say exactly what he wants, and isn't that wonderful? So it's that kind of an empowerment.
And he plays the crowd. He says something and he watches how many people clap for it.
Yeah.
And then he knows what kind of crowd. So it's a manipulation. He's very good at manipulation.
Yeah.
One of my favorite books is this a book called The Wisdom of the Ego. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. It's by George Valiant.
Mm-hmm.
And he basically says that the wisdom of the ego is that it does what it needs to do to protect the psyche. And that is its ultimate wisdom. And because we have so much intelligence, too much self-awareness can be can undermine your survival. Okay, so the ego has developed all kinds of defenses, and Freud and other psychologists have done a lot of work exploring that. But recently, there's been a lot of work in this area of unconscious cognitive bias. And if you go into Wikipedia and you search for cognitive bias, you will see a list of over 100 of documented, experimentally verified cognitive biases, most of which create distortions, which are self-serving. And we all have them, not just narcissists. We all have them. And I wonder, one of them, for example, is confirmation bias. And we all have that. It's where if I'm a liberal, I like to watch MSNBC. And because MSNBC makes me feel good about the beliefs that I already have, because I basically filter out the things I don't like, I don't believe, I disagree with. And if I'm a conservative, I watch Fox News. It's a very human phenomenon. That's just one of 150.
So,
right there.
Carl, I'm going to ask you to kind of make sure you're bringing this to where the group conversation
This is what I'm
going.
leading. This is what I'm leading to, and it gets
Okay.
to what Sean was talking about or seeking, was a connection of all of this to the big picture of the planet. We are one, denial is one of those forms of ego defense. When we don't want to face the reality that is too inconvenient for us to confront. And I think what we're dealing with is not just a problem of narcissists. It's a problem of the human race being in a state of denial because of it is self-serving for us to be in a state of denial about what we're doing to the planet.
Okay.
That's
so I'm gonna
how I
try
wrap it all up.
Okay. And
so I'm wondering if you agree, and is that what you are leading us to?
I'll tell you how in my mind I'm weaving it into what I'm talking about and what we're talking about, which is we all need ego defenses, and we all need what it takes to have our place in reality, and we all need to be able to learn from our experience and grow from our experience and adjust to reality. And so we all have a sets of beliefs, but those beliefs have to be able to be flexible and to grow in relation to what's going on. So what narcissism does is, because what makes it a delusion is that it insulates you from a learning process. It insulates
Right.
you
So
from.
connect this to the big picture now. What are you trying to say about the connection of narcissism to the plight of the planet?
I'm saying that if the basic principle of narcissism is it's all about me, and I am immune to the law of consequences, which is a good description of a delusion. That's a pretty good description of how our culture and our species has been living in the world. That how we're living in the
Okay.
world is a delusion. Yes, it's a defense. Yes, it involves all kinds of belief systems, but it's a delusion, and it's preventing us from being able to learn from our experience. And that in order to learn from our experience, we have to learn, one, to connect to our living selves inside ourselves, and two, to connect and recognize the existence of the world outside us. And the narcissist is not able either to connect to their emotional self or to the world outside, and therefore is not able to experience that connection, and therefore is not able to learn from their experience. And to the extent that that describes us as a species, that's why we're where we are. That's why we are living in delusion right now.
So we're in a sort of collective delusion. Is that
Yes,
what you're saying?
yes, yes, yes.
Bob, you
Okay.
asked someone to be a timekeeper, so you've got about 20 minutes left in
Yeah,
class if
yeah.
you want to do the experiential.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, but Borg, in terms of what you brought up, I think the question of because that is the obvious question. Like, you look at this and you go like, "Are you kidding me? This bloated buffoon," and people are, what's going on? So I think, and with Hitler as well. So I think that that's a very important ongoing discussion in this process. And like I said, my brief thing is that I think the instinct to want to be an empowered, important part of something bigger than ourselves and meaningful, potentially, which is a healthy instinct, is what gets hijacked. That's sort of my little short, cryptic
Yeah,
way of looking at that.
One other thing is, in terms of what the ego does, is projection. And one of the things that's really notable about Trump is almost everything that he accuses other people or other systems of being is something that is a rejected part of himself.
Absolutely.
I mean, it is
Absolutely.
really
Perfect.
interesting to watch.
That's beautifully
so
put.
Always belongs to the other.
And he'll even say that, and
other.
Thank you. That's right on. And that I'm rushing a little bit because I do want to get to the experiential, but you'll notice it's almost like a 4-year-old, because he'll say, "Oh yeah, no, you are." Right? He was accused of being an abuser of women, and so he convokes this thing about Clinton, or actually the word false, fake news was originally came up by progressives about the phony stuff, and then he takes it over. So it's oh yeah, no, you,
Right.
So there it is. Yeah. Okay.
And Putin does that too.
Yes. But I
guess I'm
Carl,
having a disconnect.
Carl, I need to cut it off here because I want to move to an experiential before we're out of time. So here's a good, Carl, this may address something you talked about. A healthy ego defense would be like a shield that you can put up when you need it, and you can put down when you need it. So if someone's coming at me and they're endangering me, I better put up my shield, and I might need a sword too. But if I can't put my shield down when my child needs my love, or my wife, wants to have access to my heart, if I can't put it down. So what a narcissist is they are locked in their armor. They're locked in their armor. Their armor is them, and they can't open it up and they can't put it down. And there's a horrifying movie that I saw as a kid about a man in an iron mask. I think of that. So the point is, we all have defenses, but a healthy person has to learn to be flexible with the defenses, to apply them when they need them, to not apply them when they don't, and to be skillful about that. And none of us does that perfectly. But, okay. So, because it's not that we want to get rid of our defenses. We want to thank our defenses. Our defenses are just like a watchdog. Let's say you have a Doberman by your side, okay? And when every time somebody comes near, the Doberman growls at them. So you say to the Doberman, listen, thank you for taking care of me and protecting me. I'm glad you're there. But right now, I just like to meet this person. And you're just going to have to trust me that I can do this. And if you really notice that I'm blowing it and I'm becoming a victim of this person, then do what you need to do. But I need you to stand down, as the expression goes. Okay. So we have about 20 minutes. So I want to start by situating the experiential in this discussion of narcissism. And the key point is that a narcissist can't relate to others because they can't connect with themselves. And that's why our ability to connect with ourselves and training that and practicing that and getting good at it, our ability to connect, to witness and connect lovingly with our authentic self is the foundation of our ability to have empathy and caring and connection with other human beings. And in cutting themselves, and the emotions live in the body. So in the narcissist cutting themselves off from their emotions, they have to cut themselves off from their body, because the emotions live in the body. The emotions are part of the organism of the body. Which is why all of us honing our access to our embodied physical, organismic, emotional self, the part of ourselves that lives below the ego, that is a foundation and more basic to our selfness, to who we are, to our humanity, than our roles or our status or our skills or our attributes. There's nothing wrong with having and developing skills and attributes. It's not a rejection of that. It's just saying there's something, we need to connect to something deeper than that, that's more fundamental. And we notice that when our world gets rattled, when we lose a job or lose an ability or lose a status or something else that was an important part of how we operated in the world. So we're looking for that part of us that has the ability the resilience to absorb and rebound from ego wounds. So we don't have to hold up our billboard of ourselves with increasing desperation and live in delusion. It's something like a place to come home to and access a self not filtered by our own judgments. And it's a little like when we talked, I think I talked about this already, and I'll talk more about it, but in development of a toddler, there's a thing called checking in, or what, there's another word for it, but where the toddler is held by the mother, and then the toddler goes out and has an adventure, and they're all excited, and they're fun, and all of a sudden they go, oops, it gets a little too much, and they come running back, and they get, refueling is the word, and they refuel by landing with the mother. And then the more refueled they are, then the more they can, now I feel secure and I can go out and have adventures. And then, there's a little much, and you get to refuel. So it's kind of like developing an internal refueling place, your internal place our internal place that we can go to refuel and find our fundamental comfort, our own special place inside, if you want to call it that. It's also a little bit like a favorite place in the woods. The more you go there, the more often you go there, the more you build a pathway there, which is this equivalent to building the neuronal networks of how to get there. So getting a familiarity with some place of refuge, comfort, and refueling, and being resourced in ourselves. And that place is the fundamental. So connecting with the ultimate source of who we are and where life manifests itself in us, and which is the root of our connectedness with the rest of existence. Something like the mycelia, that the underground mycelia that foster and create the connections that feed the trees and ultimately the birds and everything else in the forest. So what I'm like, so that I'd like to just support and foster all of us in developing that skill as best we can. And again, I am not a big, deeply trained, experienced meditator or whatever else. So give me a second here. So my interest is in us developing quick and dirty access to that in us. And so I'm going to go to this thing here where Mary Oliver reminds us that we do not have to be good. We do not have to walk on our knees for 100 miles through the desert repenting. We only have to let the soft animal of our body love what it loves. So, have a look around you. Is there see if there's an object or a picture or an artwork or something out the window or a tree or a plant, anything that just catches your interest, anything that you like looking at, that you feel that you're drawn to in some way, that means something to you. And then goodbye to that for the moment, because we're going inside now. And so we're going to take a little vacation from the wonderful parts of us that plan and that worry and that make sure we're taking care of ourselves and make sure our lists are kept up to date. And we're going to thank that part, but say, you know what, we'll be back. We need you, but we're going to take a vacation right now from you. And we're going to sense in to ourselves. And so close your eyes if you wish. And I'm going to invite you to offer the nurturance of your witnessing, the nurturance of your attention to your actual physical experience of being a living body. Allow there to be a great space around you and a great silence around you in which you can attune that you can be greatly attuned to whatever it is you experience in yourself in this moment, sitting right where you are, that tells you without a doubt that you are not a marble statue of yourself, that you are a living, breathing being. You may notice an energy in your hands. You may notice a vibration throughout your whole body. You may have to pay very fine attention because what you experience is a tiny little spring or sprout in the desert and needs very delicate attention. You may experience a raging storm of energy in your body. Whatever it is and where it is, offer it your awareness. And notice that your awareness nurtures your experience of being alive. And what you're experiencing is not some mystical, magical thing. Although it is that too, you're experiencing the literal processes of life going on in your body. Nature lives in your body as it does outside. There's a campfire in the mitochondria of your every cell burning. There are streams of blood, rivers and trickles of blood bringing nutrients to every campfire in every cell and carrying away the waste of every campfire in every cell. There are storms of hormones blowing through washing and blowing through your whole being, the tiniest corners. There are pulsations and rhythms. There's an infinitely intricate network of neuronal connections that connect every single tiny corner of your body into a vast network through which electrical charges and messages flow and stream back and forth and keep everything connected. And underneath all that, there is the drumbeat, the jungle drumbeat of your heart that keeps all of this going. So I'm going to be quiet for a minute and let you sink into whatever your experience is in the moment. And not quite now, but when you're ready, I'm going to tell you, I'll give you an instruction, but don't do it until you're ready. Tell it in a minute. When I invite you to do so, I want you to come very slowly back into the room and to bring with you, to maintain and bring with you your sense of connection with yourself and of your aliveness as you enter the room. As you soft focus, open your eyes. And as you soft focus, offer your witnessing to the object that you made a date with before we did this and that you're coming back to. And notice the connection between your experience and it, and how you're being in your, how you maintain your connection with your experience and have that support your connection with what you're connecting with. So why don't you do that now or at the moment, whenever you're ready from now on. Say hello to the object or thing or being. and offer it your deep witnessing that comes from your deep witnessing of yourself. And see if you can experience the reverberation of life outside you and life inside you. And whatever the rhythms and exchanges are that go on between you and it. And if you're moved to, if you're moved to, you can make one sort of gesture towards this object that expresses what your body wants to do in relationship to it. Does anything in your body want to offer a response or witnessing or physical witnessing to what you're relating to? And then allow the thing you're relating to witness you. What is it like to take in the witnessing of what you have witnessed? And whenever you're ready, come on back into the room, join the rest of us. And if you want to share anything about your experience, I'd be interested. If you prefer not to, that's fine too. We've just de-narcissisted ourselves.
I love the trees that I've planted in my yard. Love trees and the hidden life of trees.
Yeah.
And I had a thought, gee, I need to go out and hug each one of them. We have a really small yard, and they're like 13 years old now, most of them. And I just feel like I just take such joy in them. And then I've read the Overstory and the Hidden Life of Trees, and they just seem like magical beings to me. So just go out and
it's wonderful that these books like that are being written these days. It's great. That's part of the healing, right? We talked about the new consciousness being birthed in the old, and they're noticing stuff that on some level should really that the people have always known, and another level they're putting it in a way where they're saying, look at this, for God's sakes, look at what you haven't been paying attention to. Anybody else want to share something?
Karen, definitely go hug your trees and whoever else is doing it, because we are watching this class, we just had the tree cutters were taking 3 of the trees that died last year from the heat. They've just been out here as I'm listening to the class, taking down 200 and 150-year-old trees from a prior house because they'd basically burned last year. So I'm going to honor them and they're going in the process and hug the live ones. So I like that. Go hug the trees where we have them.
My object was an art quilt that I've made, and it is one of a series of 7 related art quilts. And then the series is called Fences. But as I was doing this exercise and using that art quilt for the exercise, I no longer saw fences. I saw serenity. And a quilt has some levels, and I was relating it to various levels of experiences, but that on each level I could find this area of serenity. Might be crazy, might be enlightening.
I must go now. I have an appointment. I have to leave.
Okay, bye-bye. Thank you. So, we did a get together with a few of us, and I also know there were a few folks who tried to get there and didn't find it, apparently. Do we want to do any more? Do people have time to do a little talking about that now? If we want to, we could meet at the same time, same place. I don't know how many folks would be interested. And well, it allowed us to do, since it's in nature, in the park, it allowed us to do things like this, like relating to a tree or relating to something in more embodied way with each other. So officially we are out of time, and I'm happy to talk a little more about that, or I could just put it out same time, same place, and people, and let's have people respond so we have an idea if there's a significant amount of interest in doing that. Sound good? Okay.
Would you say the time, the day again? I don't remember.
I thought 2 was a good time. We did 3 because someone couldn't do it at 2, but I don't know if that was a regular thing. So maybe I'll put.
What day was it though? I don't remember.
It was hold on.
Was it a Saturday? I threw out.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. No, yeah, it was Saturday at 3 at a place in the park that if you look at the description, actually, my instructions how to get there are pretty clear if you look at them closely. But the main deal is you do it, you wait till Windburn Road comes in from the right, and then it's the next parking place after that.
Near the duck pond, right? Near the duck pond.
Yeah, I mentioned the duck pond, but when I look more closely, it's past the duck pond. So if you stay on what's the main street there and wait for Windberg to come in from the right, and you keep going, the next parking space is the place. It's a lovely space, and if it's not available, other people are using it. It's not hard to find another beautiful spot there.
It's Granite, isn't it?
Granite,
Street?
that's right, Granite. So,
So are you doing that or you're not doing that?
pardon me?
Are you definitely doing, are you going to send an email?
I'm definitely willing to do it at 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock. I prefer 2 if there's not a reason for it to be 3 because it'll be sunnier on Saturday. But I do want some RSVPs about how many folks are interested. And
I'm interested.
okay, and if there's anyone that can't make it at 2 and 3 would make anyone for whom it would make a big difference to change it a little bit, we can see about doing that. I will just send it out. All right, good people. It's been lovely.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.